What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 101 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. We had a week off. You know, Pete was busy drumming away.
I'm sorry, everybody. If you're not a member of our Discord and you're wondering where the heck was episode 101 last week, that one's on me. I'm gonna take the L on that one. My band, Long Friend Time Friend, go check us out if you like punk. We are in the studio right now working on our second LP. So last week I was in the studio all week tracking drums. I'm going back in on Wednesday this week to finish up, and we'll have some new music out. In the
Do you have a name for it yet? Is it a secret?
We do have a name for it, but it is a secret. So I'll tell you offline if you want to know.
Yeah, I want to know. Yeah.
But we decided on a name the last couple of weeks, like right before we went into the studio. We came up with something that we really liked. So we're locked in.
Is there like a theme to it then? Like does the name, is there a theme to the songs? Are they all like one thing?
Yes. But it's not necessarily representative. Like the name has less to do with the theme of the album than it being kind of like funny and like it like kind of relates to the name of our first album as well a little bit. So we had some fun with it.
Okay. Is it another Joe Biden joke? Joe Biden falls down the stairs.
The first album was a Rocky joke. Our name is a Joe Biden joke. We only know how to make fun of things in our titles, apparently. So yeah, big apologies, everybody. We had a plan in place for us to record an episode, based on my time, and it ended up falling through a couple times, and we were just not able to get it rescheduled in a timely fashion. So big apologies for y'all on that one, but I hope we can make up for it this week with a extra special show because we got some good stuff to talk about here, Steve. Yeah,
I'm excited. You know, one of my favorite games is seemingly getting a remake, and I can't believe it.
And it's incredible, right? Let's not bury the lead, right? There is a rumor that there is a remake of Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion in the works. And funny enough, I believe it was the last time you and I sat down for a proper episode of this show. I think you brought up the fan project of them.
Sky Oblivion. Yeah, out sometime in 2024. And it's been a fan project bringing the entire Oblivion game into the Skyrim engine as like a completely playable game from beginning to end, all of the missions.
This has got to be this is the next best thing, right? At least
this has got to be, I think, probably even better. You got to imagine that they're going to be bringing this over to the same engine. Seemingly, it's being done by Virtuos, which is the studio that's working on the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. They also worked on the Dark Souls remasters and things like that.
They're also they've been a support studio on like dozens of games that you've played. Like they helped on Horizon and Forbidden West and some other bigger stuff like that.
They did like the Batman game, the Starlink stuff over on Switch. So they are like a support studio. Whether their name will even be on this, I don't know. Whether this will just be they're a support studio. It's a Bethesda game. We're putting it out as a Bethesda game kind of thing. I could probably see it being more like that, but. Allegedly, this is, we have no idea if this is true. It was posted on a subreddit, the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit.
The person who posted it claimed to be a former employee of Virtuous who was basically, and there's like a few little details, right? Like they were allegedly verified by the subreddit's mod as actually being a legitimate former Virtuous employee. So, what the verification is for the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, right? Like whether or not you take that seriously, whether or not this person could be a former employee who's then making something up or talking about something that was discussed or planned but might not ever come to, right? Like take a big old grain of salt. But where there's smoke, there is sometimes fire. So for example, we knew that the Metal Gear Solid remake was coming months, weeks before it actually was revealed, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, Jeff Grubb reported on that, right? And we knew that was on the way. We didn't know the name, the triangle. We didn't know the triangle.
That's true. So, but with that in mind, right? Like it's like this could totally be true. It could totally be smoke and mirrors, right? So, like don't kill the messenger on this one, I guess.
I think the weirdest thing and the weirdest kind of tidbit about this is that the alleged developer said that they're working on a pairing system where some of the game's going to run in the original Oblivion engine, and then there's going to be Unreal Engine 5 kind of running on top of that. Presumably, that's going to be like the graphics and physics portion.
Yeah,
No, they said the graphics and gameplay is done in Unreal Engine 5, but physics is done in like the Oblivion engine. It's very weird. Like,
the
what a
the
weird system.
the direct quote is, for instance, new graphics are rendered in UE5 project, but most of gameplay, physics, etc. are still done in. So it's like seemingly it would feel like the old game, but it will look like a modern game, which is interesting.
Yeah, also going to be the first time we've seen a game that doesn't look like a Bethesda game. That is a
Yeah.
Bethesda game, right? Because they always use their own engines. They always use like it's been recently been just been the creation engine, I think, since Skyrim onwards. But
They
it's
also
gonna be strange
they also
to see it in
claimed
Unreal Engine 5.
they also claimed it would be released by the end of 2024 or early 2025, and they said depending mostly on if it's a remake or a remaster. And like
I
either
mean,
way,
like,
shouldn't you know
like,
by
what
now?
does that mean? But what
Right.
does that mean? Like, if it's a remake or a remaster, that they're butchering together two gaming engines to make a single game. Granted, this isn't the first time this kind of thing's been done. We saw this with the Diablo 2 remake, where they had the old game running underneath at all times, and you could switch back and forth between them. You could see the old graphics being rendered, and then they put like a new graphic skin on top, which I think was also done in Unreal Engine. So you could switch between the new graphics and the old graphics at any time, but all of the stuff was handled by the original code underneath, so they didn't really need to touch that, which made it a lot easier. Sounds like to me, it depends on how intense the graphics are, but it seems similar also to what we've seen with the Demon Souls remake, where they take original code and they add new graphics on top, but the game still feels like the original game. I would say it's closer to a remake at that point than a remaster, but really it's just semantics as to what you call it.
Yeah, that's such a we did a whole episode about that, right? About like where do you draw the line? And I think ultimately the answer is different for every person. So it's probably
Mhm.
not worth getting into the nitty-gritty, right? Where it's like, I feel like if the core code has not changed, it's more of a remaster than a remake, but like where that line is going to be different for every person, right? Because then there's like examples of games like when they redid the Kingdom Hearts, at least the original. I can't remember what the situation was with Kingdom Hearts 2, but they lost all of the original code of
Oh
that
my
game and
god.
they had to remake it from the ground up, but like they remade it one for one. So it's like
So it's still a remaster,
it's
really?
literally a remake. Like, they did
Yeah.
remake it, but they intentionally made it exactly the same, just with fresher graphics, right? So, like, that is more of a remaster, but technically speaking, it's a remake. So, like, it's interesting. But to take it back to the oblivion of it all, what like what do you think the temperature is on something like this? Because I'm interested. I've long wondered why Skyrim seems to be the game that they go back to?
I
Like,
because I
why isn't
think
there a remaster of Oblivion? Why hasn't there been a remaster of
hmm,
Fallout 3 or New Vegas? Like, games that were, all from that same generation and all, I think, arguably as influential, if not, you know, the obviously Skyrim was a breakout success, right? It was a massive game. Um,
I think Fallout 4 was as well. I think Fallout 4 really took it to that level as well,
I
at
guess
least for that franchise.
I feel like the reception of Fallout 4 cooled though very quickly. Like it came out and it was well received at the time, but I feel like it's not remembered as fondly as the other Bethesda games, you know?
Yeah, I think part of it comes down to Bethesda being very protective of their IP, Bethesda Game Studios, not ZeniMax. And I think because they're such a small studio in the grand scheme of things, they've only really got capacity to work on one thing at a time. At least it seems that way anyway.
Yeah,
And they've been consumed by Starfield for the last 10 years. They don't have time to remake any of these or remaster any of
for
these.
sure.
I would
But like
imagine this comes from the higher up that
why not
we
let
need to put something out.
other studios do this kind of thing? Yeah, and maybe it is the precious
I don't
thing.
know. I think it's the same way Naughty Dog didn't want anyone to do anything. It's like
Yeah,
that's ours. We own it. This is
yeah,
our thing. It's our baby. We wanna do it. If we're gonna do a remaster
yeah.
or a remake, we're gonna be the ones to do it.
I hear you. I hear you. That makes sense to me. It's interesting because it's like I have often wondered that of like why haven't we gone back to the well on
Mhm.
something like Oblivion or Morrowind or these other games that
They do that a lot in ESO though. Like Elder
sure.
Scrolls Online is
Yeah,
constantly
but
like, "Oh,
like
we've added Morrowind
that's not
in,
the
we've
same
added
thing though.
Tamriel
You
in."
know, like I don't want to play ESO. That's not the same
No,
kind of
me
game.
neither.
And it's like no disrespect to ESO, but it's like they don't serve the same audience. And like
No,
if
but I
I'm
also want that
somebody,
nostalgia. Like, I want to go
yeah,
back and I wanna do the same storylines. I wanna see the Grey Fox, I wanna see Armand Christophe, I wanna see all these
right.
characters I know. I wanna go to that basement with the rats and stuff, you
And
know?
just like and just for like the sense of continuity, right? Like of the idea of like if you were one of the millions of people that got in on Skyrim, right? Like don't don't you want people to be able to like know more about the world and the lore and like I just it feels like you're leaving so much of that series on the table and like not giving people ways to kind of rediscover it, right? Because like there are things about those games that have not aged well just in terms of like when they came out. And like I think with some little quality of life changes, you probably could bring folks back into the fold. Like, especially for I mean, maybe Morrowind's a tougher ask. Maybe Fallout 3 is a tougher ask. But
Yeah. No,
Oblivion
I think
and New Vegas
f
feel like what
no,
the hell?
yes, yeah. I
What
think
like
Fallout 3 you could. New Vegas, I think is a tough one because that's a game I don't think BGS even wanted made. They were forced to hand over the assets to
yeah.
Obsidian while you're working on Skyrim. We wanna put out another
But it's
Fallout
like,
game.
take the L, like, it's a beloved game, right? Like, it's one of the most beloved games of that generation, and it's crazy to me that it's never gotten the BioShock Remastered treatment. It's never gotten the Skyrim Ultimate Edition treatment, you know, and, like, I think most people would argue it's the best game in the franchise. It's a shame.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think so too. I think it's the best game. I do think Fallout 4 gets a bad rap. I think though that Oblivion for Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion is better than Skyrim in a lot of ways, and I know a lot of people disagree with that statement.
You're
I
not
hope
alone, though.
Doc's listening to this one.
That's definitely
Um,
not a you know, I think it's a fairly hot take, but, like, I've heard a like, I anecdotally, I had dinner with a close friend of mine who's a big gamer the other day, and he said exactly that to me, where he loves Oblivion and Skyrim did not click for him.
it's the vibe. There's so much about it. It's set in a different time period, hundreds of years prior. But I think there's so much context you miss, even if you've played Skyrim and you haven't played Oblivion, like the fact that it's like by the nine in Oblivion, and then it's like, oh, but the ninth one is kind of was now by the eight in Skyrim, and we don't talk about the ninth god or the ninth king or whatever. Um, there's so much stuff and so many callbacks to that game in Skyrim. I think it's going to be cool to see it remade and people who have never played this game because this was like a launch title on the, or at least a launch window title on the Xbox 360.
Yeah, it was one of the first
And
games I bought on 360.
yeah, it was, and I spent so many hours on this game, like so many hours on this game. But it's a very old game, and you're right. The AI is not great, the lighting's not great, the physics aren't great. The like leveling system is ridiculous. You can just jump around town, and you'll level up. Just like it's like your
Your
acrobatics has
acrobatics,
gone
yeah.
up, your acrobatics has gone up. It's like great. So I can just like fucking cheese my way up. It's just so stupid. So I hope they fix some of that stuff. It sounds like though all of that weirdness and quirkiness will remain, and it's going to be a new graphical layer on top, which I'll be fine with. It has a new menu system that's less clunky. Maybe it has a new map. All of that stuff, I think I'll be really happy with. Like new models, new
You
character
think we're getting
models.
this? You think this is real?
Yeah, I do. I do think it
I
is
kinda
real
feel like
because
I do too. I don't know why, but this feels real to me.
because ES6 is so far away, and
Yeah,
people are ready for
exactly.
another Elder
And it's
Scrolls.
like, bro, you've re-released Skyrim like 5 times. Maybe we go back to the well on some of these other ones.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's coming. They're saying it's 2024 or
That
2025.
seems
Like this would have been perfect for 2026. That's a 20-year anniversary. You put it out as like a this is our 20-year anniversary remake. We're gonna release the game. This is gonna be, something really
that'd be
special.
cool.
But seemingly not though. But yeah, there was so much cool stuff in that game. I've played this game so many times when it came to Game Pass, when they bought Bethesda. I played the hell out of it again with like all of the cool stuff that they added, like the frame rate boost and the auto HDR and all of that stuff. I just wish it worked better on PC because it does not have controller support and it's a pain in the
This is
ass.
like what I'm talking about too. Like this is the type of stuff where I'm like, you guys gotta get your house in order and like get a version of this that's playable for modern audiences. Like it feels like overdue, I think. Given how much
Yeah, I
love there is
agree.
for Skyrim to not give people the option to even go back and discover what came before. Just feels like such a missed opportunity.
But why this one? Why not earlier? Because I feel like I never played Morrowind. I never went back that far, and I'd love to see like a ground up
I
remake
agree.
of that
I
one at
guess
some
there's an
point.
argument to be made though, right? Where it's like you've only done Skyrim all these times, so it's like, do you go further back to one that's gonna take more work, or do you go to the one right before Skyrim and maybe you can get away with this more hybrid, like it's more a remaster than a remake, whereas like 3 might really need to be remade from the ground up for it to feel contemporary. Whereas 4,
Mhm.
you might be able to get away with that a little bit?
I was just quickly looking at the engine before we move on. It's made in a weird engine called Gamebryo by a company that I don't
I
think
remember the
exists
Gamebryo
anymore.
engine though.
Yeah. Apparently, it's the engine that they made Epic
Uh-huh.
Mickey with. So I think that went by the wayside probably around the same time Epic Mickey did.
I wanna say that they used that for the original Fallout, no? Was that
Yeah, Fallout 3 they did, and New
okay,
Vegas.
okay.
The first game it was used with was a game called Atlantica Online in 2008. No, Dark Age of Camelot in 2001 was the first game they used
No,
it
no,
with.
no.
Zoo Tycoon 2.
Oddworld Munch's Odyssey was the first game in 2001.
Oh, yeah, okay, right. There's so many they did so many in this, and
Yeah.
they did Morrowind in it as well.
They did some, like, ports too, like, Bully the Scholarship Edition was done in this, like,
Ridiculous.
very random.
Oh, Morrowind is a Ubisoft published game? What?
Really?
According to this Wikipedia article, I have no idea if that's true or not.
What? I mean, that would make sense though, I guess, right? Because that would have been before they were independent. No, okay. Oh, it says here it's published by Bethesda Softworks. What are you reading?
Yeah, on the if you go to the Gamebryo page, I think the console ports, the Xbox port is published by Ubisoft.
Okay, well, look at that. No, I don't see that. I'm seeing the same thing. I don't know, man. I don't know. This is a
I'm on the Ubisoft Press Center, and there are messages relating
Oh,
to
I see it. I see it. No, I
that
do.
game.
Under the net immerse games. I'm sorry. It was a
Yeah.
second list. That's wild. Well, look at that. We learn something new every day. The Futurama game also made in it. So, they're in good company.
Oh, I've never played that. I need to play that. I used to
It's
love those old like licensed cartoon
Me
games. There was
too.
like a
Me too.
Buzz Lightyear Infinity and Beyond game or whatever that I remember playing as well. That was great. It was
The
based on the Buzz
crazy
Lightyear TV show.
the crazy thing about the Futurama game is that it's like straight up a lost episode of the show. Like they have the original voice actors of Fry, Leela, and Bender in the roles, and it's all original. It's a totally original script with original voice lines and everything. It's like a lot different than what you normally would get, where it's like, damn, like, yeah, they really tried to make this a thing. That's kind of cool.
What era was that from? Like PS2,
PS2,
Xbox
GameCube,
360? Yeah.
360, or no, Xbox original, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
I never played it either, but I was too young when it was a contemporary game, and by the time I wanted it, you couldn't find it anywhere. So I got maybe that's one to play on the old Steam Deck, Steve. Who's to say? Allegedly. Speaking of things that are allegedly happening, another game that at least I'd be pretty excited for a remake here. We got some rumors about Red Dead Redemption getting a remake, and we've got this is one I feel a lot more confident being like, this is
Oh
happening.
yeah.
It's
There's a
real,
lot of smoke on their actual website
a
this
lot,
time.
right? So I grabbed an article from I'm not gonna lie to you, this website. It's Game VRO or Game Vro. I don't know. Either
It's
way,
probably generated by ChatGPT.
probably. Yeah. So, but they
I'm
did a good
sorry.
roundup. So thank you, I guess, ChatGPT.
Really, though, the
Or
news is coming from Tez Funds too over on Twitter,
yeah,
at least the website formerly known as Twitter.com.
yeah. We're not gonna call it anything else. Yeah. So Tez too is the leaker over on Twitter who has like gotten most of this information together. It's not literally the only person. There are a couple other folks who have like similarly either corroborated or found other things. So we've got all of the sources in this article down below if you want to go check it out for yourself. But more or less, the stuff that we found is a new logo, right? Which is Rockstar Games presents Red Dead Redemption. There's a new Red Dead Redemption font that was found on Rockstar's website. There was a Korean age rating website that also um, like listed the game as being rated. This is something that has happened a lot, right? Like we've had multiple games leak this way because specifically in South Korea, often there will be leaks of these games getting rated well before they're announced, and that's happened quite a few times. And then on top of that, there was another source that was cited here where uh, Colin Moriarty, who used to work at IGN, was another person who's kind of like similarly to the Jeff Grubb Metal Gear thing, just been like, I've heard that this is a thing. I've heard that they're actively working on this, right?
Hmm.
So this is like I said, this is one where there is a lot of smoke. So it feels like there must be fire. Not to mention that this game is way overdue for a remake, right? Like it's never ever been released on PC.
No, it hasn't, has it? And the best way to play this at the moment is in like backwards compatibility mode on a Series X
Yeah.
with like the Xbox 360 version.
Which, like,
But that
great.
sucks.
It's
No one
cool
wants
that
to play that.
you can do that, but also that's bullshit. That's the only way to
Yeah.
play one of the best games of all time? Forget
Plus,
that.
like the
Ridiculous.
map of Red Dead Redemption 2 is like this big, and there's like a tiny little bit in the middle of it that's like Red Dead Redemption 1. So like I feel like they could just take that little bit that they redid for Red Dead Redemption 2, that little area, and just remake the game. And I would imagine that's what they've done, which is awesome. I hope that's what they've done anyway. We don't know if it's a remaster or a remake. We don't know any more other than it's called RDR1 SP or RSP or something like that. Yeah, RDR1 RSP. So seemingly that stands for Red Dead Redemption Rockstar Presents. So we'll see what that means.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's gonna be similar to the GTA,
I don't think it
whatever.
is. I don't think it is going to be similar to the GTA stuff where they just took the mobile versions of the games and jazzed them
Well,
up a little bit.
what I was gonna say, you're right. That was maybe a bad comparison. I think it would be like that in Rockstar is not producing it. It's another team that's working on it, and Rockstar is doing the Rockstar Presents thing because they're not actively
Oh,
working
we're
on it.
distancing ourselves from this. That might be a dumpster fire. Okay.
Yeah, but I think given what you said though, right? Like there isn't a mobile version of this game to pull from. So like we should seemingly we're already in a better position because if the worst case scenario is they take the original, Xbox 360 PlayStation 3 version and just upres it and it runs a little bit, like that's fine. That's not a I don't think anybody would complain about that.
Yeah, yeah, but I can do that anyway with the copy on disc I own from the 360. And like, I don't want just that. I want something a little bit more that I'm going to be repaying for. You know?
I agree with you. I also don't think that that's necessary for it to be successful. You just given the context of what
Yeah,
we just said, the
I
fact
think
that like
I think they could just re-release it on PC and it'll be
yeah,
successful.
exactly, exactly. And I think my point is less that I'd be happy with that and more that I'd be satisfied with that if it was like, hey, like this one of the best games of all time is just now more playable and it runs a little bit better and it's a little bit smoother and it has some modern day, quality of life increases. That's fine. Like, like I want more than that, but I don't need more than that to be satisfied just because I love this game so much and it's so insane that you can't play it on Steam. This would be such a perfect Steam Deck game, you know?
Yeah, really weird. I think you could definitely try emulating it, and I think it probably
For
would
sure.
run okay
Yeah,
in
it's
the PS3
literally doable.
emulator.
Yeah, it's literally
But
doable.
there's no official way, and there should be. There should be a way to play this game. I'd like to see Red Dead Revolver get some treatment at some point as well, because I think that game's good. I
One at
liked
a
that
time,
game.
one at a time, Steve.
And then when they're done with that, table tennis, because that game, phenomenal.
Isn't
Table
is
tennis is phenomenal.
am I the only one that thinks it's insane that they put Bully on PC and never released Red Dead Redemption? I love Bully. Loved Bully when it came out. But like Red
Did
Dead was such a bigger
Bully got a
game.
mobile port as well, didn't it?
It did, but why didn't Red
That's
Dead?
why.
But why didn't Red Dead? That's their
Maybe it's not
second most
feasible.
it's their most second most successful franchise. Like
Yeah. Bully
I
was a PS2 game,
it's old.
Same with all the GTA stuff.
You're
So
right.
like that was probably less intense
Yeah, you're
on
right.
older
You're right.
mobile
You probably can't
devices.
get that game on mobile. But like whatever. I don't know.
I
It's
think you probably could now, but when they were doing these ports to mobile,
no.
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 But now it would be fine. I mean, people are playing Genshin Impact at like 4K on their Samsungs,
Crazy.
It's like it's fine.
Just put it on PC. I just
Seemingly they will, And Colin Moriarty was saying that it's likely going to be announced in August. So we don't have long to wait. That's potentially this month. God knows when this month. But
watch.
this
It's
month.
gonna be tomorrow in classic this show fashion. We'll report on it and then be like, by the way, it's announced. Great.
I'd be okay with that. It means, it's another one of those announcements that we can talk about next week.
I do like when that happens when we say it's gonna happen. We're like, oh, this is definitely real, and then they confirm it because then we seem smart. That's okay. But
Yeah. I mean, this one seems more likely than Elder Scrolls, I think.
I think
If
so.
I'm gonna pick, if I'm
This
gonna
seems
be
real.
hedging my bets on it,
Yeah.
this one's there's a lot more there based on the assets on a
There's
website. There's
multiple.
seemingly like a news post set up ready to go out for the press release.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff there, whereas Elder Scrolls 4 is one person on a subreddit
Who
who
may or may
decided
not
to
be
make a
at who they
post.
say they are, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like
So
we
it's like,
with this we have 4 separate unique things that point to it being real, which makes you feel pretty comfortable. And again, it like not to say that Oblivion doesn't, right? I gave a whole rant about why it does. This feels so overdue. So overdue that this game just never came to PC. Like you got to imagine it would be a huge seller on PC. All the Rockstar games sell well on PC.
why didn't they do it on PC? Like they just moved on to GTA?
I think it was a victim of when it came out because like that was such an awkward time for PC gaming. Like I think we sometimes forget where at the beginning of the PS3 360 era there was kind of a lull in PC. And like I feel like it was a couple years into
It
that
was
generation where it got more established again.
it was pretty far in. It was 2010 it came out. I
Yeah, I
feel like in 2010 that we were getting some big chunky PC games. Like didn't GTA 4 come to PC?
think it did. Yeah.
Yeah, and that came out in 2008. So like they imported that game, but they didn't import
Yeah,
Red
what
Dead
the
Redemption.
why? That's so weird. That's so weird.
Is it a different studio? One's Rockstar North. What's Red Dead Redemption?
I don't know.
Rockstar San Diego. So two different studios. So it could be related to that.
It just seems so strange that Red Dead Redemption 2 came and went, and we still have just they've never ever thought to been like, what if we get this game on PC?
Yeah, I know.
Weird.
It's weird.
But
And it came to Xbox One, but not PS4. That's also weird.
really?
According to their website, according to the Rockstar Games website, and maybe this is incorrect, I don't know. It's their website though. It says Xbox One, PS3, and Xbox 360. I don't know why,
Fuck.
but that's what it says.
Maybe just through backwards compatibility, they mean?
Yeah, it could be, but then I guess maybe they didn't update it for Series X at that point.
I I don't know, man. I'm deeply confused. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm deeply confused by that. That's very strange to me. But okay, fair enough. Point
Yeah, I
being,
mean, well, I guess we'll find out, won't we?
we're ready for this. We're ready for this one.
I think, according to Wikipedia, it's only PS3 and 360, so they must be talking about backwards compatibility. So,
Okay.
but in which case, it's also on Series X and I guess PS5 through streaming, which is cheating, so it's
Yeah,
not really.
that doesn't count. That's nothing. I can put my disc in the Xbox and it works. That counts as running on the console, I think.
Yeah, but this game's got a 95 out of 100 on Metacritic, and
Yeah,
it's
dude.
never once seen a re-release.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And like it's that good. Right? Like make no mistake. That game like you remember, right? I played Red Dead Redemption 2. I like that game a lot. Red Dead Redemption 1 is one of the best games ever made. Like that's on my top 10, I think. I
I've never played it.
love that game.
I own it, and I've never played it.
I think it holds up really well. I think there's things about the gameplay where it's like Rockstar shooting is always a little funky, but like the Red Dead mechanic makes it so much better. And just like I loved that story. John Marston is such a good character, and like that the ending of that game is one of the most memorable, well executed endings in any video game. I think I remember finishing that game and like just sitting there and, like, having that moment where, like, the credits are rolling and I'm, like, staring at myself in the reflection of the screen, just put the controller down, like, went and stood in the shower for, like, 20 minutes, just like, "What the fuck?" Like, that was what an ending, what a powerful ending, you know? I really love that game. I would love for a new generation of players to get another shot at it.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a different generation that played it because the number one review on Metacritic.com is from G4 TV, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah, that'll do it. I wonder how long it is. It's like the
It
second
can't be that long, like 20 hours.
it's 18. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you're just trying to mainline it, main and sides is 26 and a half. It says completionist is 46 and a half.
it's not a long game. You can
No.
do that in a weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great game. I really hope this is real and I hope you try it. I think
Yeah, I think a remake or a remaster is like a way to get me to pick it up and play it.
it's an excuse. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's back in the conversation again. I can play a more modern version of it. I don't have to jump through, like, hoops with emulation or get an old copy," and, like, I think it for obvious reasons, it breathes new life back into an old IP. So it would be cool to see that game get a moment again.
Mhm.
So I wanna use that as a jumping off point, though, Steve, right? Because we're talking here, talking about these 2 old games, 2 games that you and I have both already played, that we already love, have already left their mark, and we're very excited to go back to them, theoretically. My question for you is, do you think that this push that we've been having more recently to have all of these remakes, these remasters, kind of going back to the well on these classic IP, right? We had the Resident Evil remakes the last couple years. We had 4 this year. We had Dead Space earlier this year. We had Metroid Prime remastered. We had a whole episode a couple weeks ago where we talked about how many, if not all, of the top rated games of the year until Tears of the Kingdom came out were remakes, were old games coming back,
Yeah.
right? And that's not always a guarantee. We've looked at plenty of examples on this show of games that have been remade and scored lower than their original version. It happens, right? But generally speaking, you go back, you remake a classic game, whether you remake it or remaster it, you can take it to the bank, right? It's going to have a certain level of success. It has a certain amount of a baked in audience already. It's looked at as a safer bet. And as we are moving into, you know, whether or not you want to believe my government or not, I guess. Uh, as we're moving into a recession, right, and we are seemingly going to be in this era where companies are more risk averse, consumers are maybe want to go with stuff that's tried and true. Do you think this is a problem for like our AAA games, single player AAA games in a healthy space right now, or do you think that like this over reliance on remakes or visible franchises is that something that you worry about?
No, I don't think so. I actually think I think AAA gaming is in a really good space at the moment. I think we've had like a bit of a renaissance with single player games. Look at the stuff that Respawn's putting out. I think EA has kind of really pivoted back to single player. I think Microsoft is really focused on single player and kind of trying to take on Sony with some of their acquisitions and some of the stuff that they're developing in house. But I also think that these are just like an inevitability. They are because we seemingly have moved away from big DLC expansions. We moved to those like little mini in between games, which I think was a good way to get teams working on something and pushing something out while they're preparing the next project. That's what these are for. That's what these are. Or they're just something to put out in between to tide fans over while we're spending 10 plus years developing a AAA game, because that's how long it takes now. And especially something like a Bethesda game or a Rockstar game where they take a long,
Like a
long
decade.
time to make. Yeah, like a decade. Even though, in the case of Rockstar, they've got multiple studios. In fact, Rockstar North's working on GTA, Rockstar San Diego's working on the Red Dead stuff. They've got other studios dotted around supporting them. There's a lot of people working on these games, and I think remakes and remasters enable them to stay afloat. The company gives the developers something to work on, and it also keeps fans happy. I think there's different cases, right? Like there's different there's like a spectrum. Like you've got the Final Fantasy VII remake, which is like, we're really reimagining this, and we're going to milk the hell out of this
How do
one
you take
game
something
for the
old
next
and make it new
decade.
again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you've got like the remaster, seemingly like what Elder Scrolls 4 and Red Dead Redemption is going to be, which is we're taking something that you have nostalgia for, that you love, and we're just going to add new life into it. We're going to maybe spice it up a little bit with some quality of life improvements and make it look nice, make it look like a current gen game, but it's going to play like you remember. One, you get the nostalgia audience, you get the people who played it before and love it. You get the people that came in on a sequel that never played the original, like they played Skyrim or they played Red Dead 2, and they want to go back and play the original and see where it started, but maybe it feels too old for them. That's almost a 20-year-old game. It's like a ridiculously old game in the grand scheme of things. I can't believe how old I feel when I say it's 20 years old. So I think it's an inevitability, and it doesn't make me worried at all. I think there's a space for both. There's a space for games as a service, for free to play, and there's space for these giant single player games that suck people in for 70 to 100 to 200 hours.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think broadly speaking, I agree with you. In that I don't necessarily worry yet, right? I think particularly this year, right? Like so many of the hottest games that we're looking at, that we're thinking of as game of the year, that are, breaking sales records and all that, they are single player games. And even with something like Tears of the Kingdom, which is like in an established franchise, it's new, right? Like it's Legend of Zelda, but this is the most different Legend of Zelda maybe ever, right? With a couple maybe other examples you could argue, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Tune into Nintendo Noise if you want me to make that argument. Um, I so like I see that side of it, right? Where it's like we have a lot of really good single player games, and you know we're in a healthier spot than we maybe were a previous generation or so ago. But I think the area where I get worried feels dramatic, I guess, but like where it gives me pause is at the end of the day, every organization has a limited amount of resources. And every time you say yes to one thing, it kind of automatically makes you say no to something else. Right. And I think there are examples where that's not a one-to-one thing. I think of the situation with The Last of Us comes to mind for me, right? Where like the report, my understanding, right, of how development on Last of Us Part 1 went is that the team that are the coders, the gameplay design folks, the boots on the ground, right? We've read time and time again, right? And Jason Schreier's book is a great place to go check it out, right? Either Press Reset or Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, where generally speaking, after a big AAA game ends, a ton of people get laid off, right? Because there's a period in development where you need to ramp up and you need more people, and then as you transition into pre-production on your next title, you don't need that many people on the ground. You don't need that many people um, on staff, and it's expensive to keep that many folks just sitting around holding their hands waiting for the next thing to come through. So if you can have a project like Last of Us Part 1 where you can take those folks that had been working on Last of Us Part 2, and while we work on pre-pro on Last of Us Part 3 or the Last of Us multiplayer game or the next new IP from Naughty Dog, all those folks that would have lost their jobs transition over to The Last of Us Part 1. They work on that. And to your point, Sony gets a small in terms of effort, right? Low effort, high reward release that didn't take the same level of investment or time as a normal AAA game, but gives the same return on investment, right? Like
Probably a
it
greater
sells
return on
probably
investment
a
in a
lot
case
better
of yeah.
actually. Yeah, you're
Because
right.
then they've and I think you can then use that to offset the cost of development of the original game of The Last of Us
Correct.
Part 2 because we've
Correct.
reused the assets. Because there was never going to be a DLC for that game. It didn't need one in the same way that The Last of Us Part 1 needed one. And that's what DLC used to be for. It used to be to reduce the cost of the development of these games. We can continue to add to it. We can eke more stuff out of it. We'll sell these
Get
season
people to not
passes.
historically, right? Get them to not sell their copy back to GameStop and then undercut sales, which
Well,
is
that's why we
obviously
had those
not as much
stupid
of a problem these days,
had
but
those stupid codes in the box where
uh-huh.
you was like, "Oh, you can only get this if you bought the game brand new," and
Buy the
type
new
the
copy.
code in, and then you had to like see if you ever bought a game used. It was like, oh, "Have I won the lottery? Did someone redeem this? Let me
Forget the
put this
code,
in."
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it was the EA's Play Online Pass bullshit that I
Uh-huh.
hated the most. But
They did it with plenty of stuff though. Like, I remember it was like Dragon Age Origins. There was a DLC character that you would get if you bought the game new, and if you didn't, you'd have to pay to get that DLC. And that
so
was like,
stupid.
but like honestly, I don't hold that against them because at that time, GameStop was really cannibalizing game sales in a way that was super toxic to the industry. Like, fuck GameStop, right? Like, I don't care if GameStop exists. I care if like if there are a million copies of Dragon Age that got bought used, that's a ton of money that got taken away from the studio that would make the next game, right? Like, that's not good, right? So it's a different time. But point being, when you look at examples like that, that works for me. That makes sense to me. When you look at the example of like how Pokemon handled doing the and whether or not you like those games, how you thought they came out, that's a different conversation. But having a different studio do the Gen 4 remakes,
I
right?
mean, that's
Like,
seemingly what Oblivion is going to be. We've got Virtuos
right.
in, and that's what Sony have done for years with Bluepoint. It's like, oh, we want to
Sure.
remake these games. We're going to get a studio that only does that. That
So
this is their job.
and that's where you get into this weird dance, though, right? Because it's like, okay, if you're outsourcing the work, is the team that you're outsourcing it to good enough to produce the quality that you're looking for? Like, because I want a Red Dead Redemption remake. I don't want a busted one that doesn't work or that is an inferior
Depends.
version
Yeah,
of
I
the
know, but
original. And
that very much depends on the team. If it was Red Dead Redemption remakes coming and it's rumored to be done by Bluepoint, you'd be like, oh shit, I'm on
you wouldn't
board for
care,
this.
right? You wouldn't
You'd be
care.
like, yeah, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be a
So
slam dunk.
point being, though, right? Like for that to work, it requires a publisher to either own a studio that can do that, like Sony bought Bluepoint, or to have an ongoing relationship with a third party studio that you know can deliver quality, which is a harder equation. So then, like, you come to this thing of like, okay, then like do we do it in house? Do we try to control the narrative that way? And like that's all well and good, but then you can get into that situation of like, is this remake getting made instead of a new project? Is this is are we now making a new entry in an existing IP versus taking the gamble on something new or doubling down on something that we tried and maybe it went okay? And the reason I bring this up is just this week, right? We had a story that was making the rounds that apparently there was a sequel planned from Ubisoft for Immortals Phoenix Rising, right? Which everybody remembers that was that Breath of the Wild style game that they had made. They had a bunch of the team that were like Assassin's Creed veterans that wanted to go work on something new. So they made this offshoot studio. They make this new game. It comes out. It does pretty well, right? Seemingly anyway. It was
Heavily
received.
inspired by Breath of the Wild.
Sure. Which fair enough, right? Like that's
Mhm.
cool. They were trying to do something different and establish a new IP and kind of go in a different direction. And like seemingly, right, it was reviewed pretty well. It was pretty critically well received. I don't know how well it sold. But they
Probably the
maybe
same way every Ubisoft game that's not got Assassin's Creed or Tom Clancy on the front. Not very well because they put it out and within a month it's like half price. I
and
just don't
then
understand that studio.
and then like now, right? Like that game that there was a sequel that was in active development. It was supposed to be had a focus on Polynesian gods. Steven Titillo over at Axios like talking about it and has heard about it. Apparently, it was being handled pretty well. It seemed
Yeah, sounds
promising. It was
cool.
coming along, and now it got axed, right? And it was one of those games that they canceled. And from what they understand is that like it's because they're doubling down on the IP that already work, and that they're taking that team and they're putting them back on Assassin's Creed, and they're going to be working on
You think
Assassin's
that's the
Creed
real
Red.
narrative? Or do you think the narrative is Ubisoft lost so much talent that they really needed to reroute the limited resource they have
No,
back to what they know works?
I'm sure that's part of it, but I think it's a multifaceted issue, right? Where it's like, okay, we put out this new IP and maybe it performed okay, maybe it didn't, but like a sequel is usually where you find people, right? The first game comes out and it's received well, second one comes out, does a little bit better. Like that often happens, right? We just talked about the Elder Scrolls, right? Yeah, Morrowind, critically really well received. Oblivion, critically really well received. They sold fine. Skyrim was the breakout, and it was the third entry on that console, right? Like that was a franchise that they were able to iterate until they got to the zenith, where like it became what it is
Mhm.
now. And like the idea that like, oh, you didn't nail it on the first one, we're gonna put you back on Assassin's Creed. That I think does speak to what I'm talking about with this, era right now that we're kind of approaching where like games cost more than they used to. Inflation is hitting everybody hard and they have less money to throw around on, recreation. And like, are people gonna take the chance on the new IP? And I don't even just mean the publisher, right? It's consumers. Are consumers gonna take a chance on a new IP? And if somebody like Ubisoft is not willing to invest in building up an IP like that, the answer is probably no. They probably won't. They won't stick
And I
around.
think that's the problem. It's not willing to invest in it because what? Guess what? There are so many people willing to invest in a new IP. We're all going to be playing Starfield next month. We're all really excited
Yep.
about that game. And that's because we trust Bethesda. We trust that they can make really good games in this style, this open world style. And they've shown us so much good shit from that game. Whereas Immortals kind of came and went. It landed with a bit of a thud. Yes, it maybe had a little bit of a good critical reception, but I don't remember anyone talking about it. And it could have been that it was released around other games that people were playing, and it got lost in the kind of the noise. But
Shuffle.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on at Ubisoft. I think the recession does make people risk averse. AAA was always about risk rather than quality. It was always about like, oh, we're gonna take less risk. That makes this a AAA game, or a AA game. We can be a little bit more riskier with it. But I don't know what is risky. Like, is Sony investing in live service risky because that's something new to them, or and leaving potentially single player behind? That seems really risky to me, rather
I
than the
think
other way
so.
around.
Yeah, like I do think that's risky, and I think it's a choice that probably made a lot more sense a couple years ago when they
In the
started
same way
like,
PSVR 2 probably made more sense a few
yeah,
years ago.
yeah, and that's the problem is that like when you have these massive companies like making a decision, you can't turn on a dime, right? Like if when you're PlayStation, like when you invest several years of R&D into this VR headset and then the market changes, it's like, well, what do? You put it out and you take the fucking L. You sell as many as you can sell and you leave it in the dust. And like that's what they're gonna do. And I have a feeling that this live service thing is going to probably go the same route unless that's their expectation is like, look, we're going to invest $2 billion to develop 10 of these games and 9 of them are going to be failures. And one of them is going to be the success that pays for the next round of them that we try. Maybe that's okay if that's their mentality and they know that some of these games are going to go belly up and they have a plan in place to not lay people off and not have a studio's livelihoods be connected to whether these games are successful. That might be legitimate, right? Like that could make sense. If you do get the one Fortnite level hit, you make your money back on the fucking 9 games that didn't hit. And maybe they think that makes sense. I don't. I think that seems like a huge gamble and the idea and it comes back to what I'm saying, right? We know from their internal documents that the plan is to invest up to 60% of their development budget towards these live service games. That could mean a lot of things though, right? We know they're increasing their budget by $2 billion overall anyway. So like, does that mean less single player games are getting
Yeah, it's
made?
gotta mean less. It's got to.
And it's like not definitively, not a huge percentage less, But I think yes, right? Because at the end of the day, that's $2 billion you could have spent on a single player game. That's $2 billion you could have spent on the style and pedigree of game that
Well, we know
PlayStation
how
is
much
known
they
for.
cost now,
Yeah,
right?
200 million.
They're like, yeah, 200 million. So that's 10 single player games you
Right.
could have made.
And it's like that could have been building a new studio. That could have been adding a couple hundred people to a team like Insomniac or Naughty Dog or Santa Monica so that you can increase the output, right? We know Insomniac has a third game in development now, we know. Um, they could be doing that at all their studios. They could be trying to build them up and be able to get them to work on more projects at the same time. They've decided that they're going this other direction. And it's just I don't know. It's interesting because I think it's a multifaceted issue. Like at the end of the day, I think that you're probably right. I think that like AAA games are overall in a healthy space, and that like the vast majority of the studios that are putting out that caliber of games, a lot of them are successful and they're finding audiences and they're getting critically well received. Like it doesn't feel like we're getting as many something like Deus Ex Machina, like from the 360 PS3 generation, where it was like so critically well received, but it sold like ass and it just died, right? Because it was, just didn't have the juice. I feel like
Mhm.
we've been on a better side of that the last couple of years, right? There's less high profile, like outright failures and, whatever. But like, I look at all of this and it's like, wanting more remakes and remasters, wanting to bet on live service, wanting to bet on existing IP that you already know is going to sell, that I really don't want to see AAA get to the place that Hollywood's in now, where there's just this kind of dearth of anything in the middle, right? And it's the only stuff that can survive are these major megalithic blockbusters.
The
And then,
Barbenheimers, yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then like your little art house films, right? That like, they have their own audience and like that's fine. That's what indies are.
Yeah, here's a 4 by 3 movie with, like, weird color scheme that everything's centered.
And it's just like I don't want that. I don't want to see and I think a lot of people hold the opinion that that's already what AAA games are like, that they're homogenous and they're this and they're that. I don't think they are. I think we're in a spot where there's a pretty good breadth and it's pretty healthy, but I worry
I think
that we're going to
studios
get away from that
themselves
these
I
next
think
couple of years.
studios themselves get pigeonholed, though. I think that, we saw that with Guerrilla pre-Horizon. They were the
Sure.
Killzone studio. We see that with, all sorts of places, right? Rockstar was the GTA studio until they did Red Dead. Bethesda
Right.
was, "Oh, they make Elder Scrolls," until they made Fallout. And I and same with Naughty Dog. They were the Crash studio for a while, then they were the Jack and Daxter studio for a while, then they were the Nathan Drake studio for a while, and now they're the Last of Us studio, and I don't know what comes next. It seems like it's probably the Last of Us game, and I'd like to see a new IP from them. I think that's what happens, right? They get stuck in a rut, and I think it's because these games take so fucking long to make that they're just like so far down the pipeline by the time they realize that no one actually wants this game anymore. And Ubisoft has fallen foul of that so many times. It's like, oh, we're gonna chase games as a service, and then everyone's like, yeah, but we don't actually want that anymore. Like, we're really sick of games as a service, and it's like, oh, okay, well, we've already made it, so can you buy it anyway,
And like
please?
that was a whole thing too, right? Because there was that moment where like games as a service was the most dominant thing, and they had a ton of these games. And I remember a bunch of them. People were like, "Oh yeah, that game came out and failed," and like they didn't. They were making tons of money and they were like quietly successful. But like we've moved on from that, and there's only a couple games now that I think can really support the audience that they need to be profitable. And like you get to a point where like years and years and years and years in, it's like if I play Destiny and that's the game as a service that I play, am I really going to stop playing Destiny to go jump on something else? Am I going to stop playing Fortnite if that's what all my friends already play? Like the answer is no. You're not.
Or you're
Like,
all gonna stop for a month. You're gonna go play something else for a month and check it
and then
out,
you'll hop back
like
over.
everyone did with Apex Legends, and then you're gonna go straight back to what you were playing.
And like you might get a lucky break with something like Apex Legends where like you're able to establish enough of an audience that it can survive like between big updates and stuff like that. But like look at Overwatch. Like look how ubiquitous and popular Overwatch is and now it's just nothing. Like I don't know,
Hey,
dude.
it's coming to Steam. Maybe it will be something again
We'll see. We'll
at some
see.
point.
But it's
I mean, that's on them for fucking it up. We did not need an
Yeah.
Overwatch 2.
No, you're right.
It just did not.
But I think it does speak to the idea that, like, there's this idea that, like, if you get the games as a service thing right, that you'll be like, "We'll make a Fortnite or a GTA Online, and it'll exist for 10 years, and it'll never stop making money," and it's just like, I think that's the exception and not the rule, and I think planning to try to make something that is the next big thing is a fucking fool's errand.
Some studios seemingly are able to do it though, again and again and again, and I don't know why.
I mean, who can do it again and again? Who has that many, like,
I mean, I
examples
feel
of
like
mul
Blizzard was that for a while. It was like, oh, we
Sure.
got Diablo, we got World of Warcraft, we got Overwatch, and all of them
StarCraft,
were
obviously.
slam dunks, StarCraft, and then every single time they put something new out, it was like a slam dunk. Overwatch 2 seems to be the dud, but Diablo 4 was seemingly a return to form.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong. It's interesting
Like
though, right?
they're able to do it, and I
That's also
think Bungie is able to do it as well. I
That's also,
think
like, the
Marathon's
only
gonna be
thing
a
that
hit.
those companies do, which I think
Yeah, and
also
I think
makes a
that's
big difference.
fine. I think a lot of these studios need to focus on the niche, right? You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into we're only going to make this one game ever. But Bethesda, everyone knows what a Bethesda game studio game is. You go, Bethesda made this, and you're like, oh, it's open world. I can go around. There's so much immersion. There's all sorts of shit I can pick up and like do,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna really be in on it for like hours and hours and hours. And we can do that with a different skin on it.
I think the thing
I
with
know what a Ubisoft game is. It's I'm going around and I'm checking
Sure.
boxes.
Yeah, for the single player stuff anyway. It's interesting though too, because like, I think when you look at some of the, like, more recent failures, I think a lot of the problem is that though, right? Like you said, like, oh, like, these studios get pigeonholed, and it's like, I think, like, you need to pigeonhole yourself to be successful in that arena. Like, you need to be like, "We're Riot Games, and the thing we make is League of Legends." And, like, yeah, now, fucking how many years into them existing, they're making new games, they're making these single player indie games that star their characters, they're working on a fighting game, they made the
Then
team fight
maybe we need
tactics and
sub
that shit.
brands. Like
Maybe,
Ubisoft used to
but
have sub brands for all their studios, and it's like, oh, we're just gonna call you Ubisoft Milan and Ubisoft
yeah,
Paris now.
yeah, yeah. I feel like what you have to, because it's I think that's the
Because
thing I worry
EA
about
does
with
that.
Sony, right? Like, you look at Sony, that's the thing I worry about, where it's like, does Naughty Dog wanna make a multiplayer game for the next 10 years? Like, is that what they wanna do? Like, and
Seemingly it was. Like they were up for the
yeah,
challenge.
I
And
guess,
I don't know
but
that they are now. Like that tweet that they put out, it seemed
yeah.
to really kind of backtrack and be like, oh, we're gonna work on something else and we're gonna kind of go away and see if we can make this work. Plus, I think by the time that game's out, everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, remember The Last of Us? That was fun. Like, are we gonna care?
I don't know, but it's also like that IP is so strong. If it comes out and it's good, I think people will care. But if it comes out and it's mid, or if it's like it
Yeah,
comes out and it
you
only
gotta get that perfect.
and it's like, that's another interesting question, is like, is that part of the problem with this model? Is that, like, the expectation is that it goes on forever? Like, could you have these kind of games where it's like it's for a year and that's it and it's done, right? Like, and maybe that's good enough. I don't know, but I don't. I think it's complex, and we're at a point with it where, like, the next couple of years, I think, are going to be really interesting to see, like, how these trends play out, and like who are the winners and losers, and like on these bets, because like it feels very tumultuous, some of
I
these
think
decisions.
yeah, I think Microsoft is gonna be the overall winner. They buy everyone, but and I'm really worried about some of the Sony stuff. Like none of those live service games they showed off at that recent presentation spoke to me. I was just like, I
No,
don't care about any of these.
they look bad.
Just show me more single player shit. That's all I care about that your
Uh-huh.
studios do.
Yeah, I'm right
But
there with you.
I get that that doesn't make them money. They've got the possibility of losing Call of Duty in 10 years. They need to figure out what they're going to replace that with. What's the next big thing? FIFA doesn't exist anymore. It's called like EA Football Club. So it's just like, is that really going to be sticking around at this point? What is the next big thing? And I think Sony really missed out on a lot of them in the past with they really missed the boat on live service. They don't have really a single live service game. And I think they just want one that brings in revenue and people are really in on, and it's like exclusive to their platform. But they also own Destiny, so at the end of the day, they're kind of winning in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't know. It's gonna be interesting because I'm with you where, like, it feels like such a risk for them to do this at this moment in time, and I can't imagine looking back and seeing this and being like, "Oh, wow, you know what? This was the right call." But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that. I mean, I don't know if I hope I'm wrong, because then do they double down on that even further and I get less of the games I actually want from them? I don't know. But
Or does that give them so much more money that they can invest into more of those
and
games
they
that
can
you
just
like?
write blank checks and it doesn't matter if they're
Because
successful.
because I do think Sony cares about generating new IP that they can use elsewhere as well. Like the TV shows and the movies that they've been putting out been successful for them. They want to keep doing that. They own movie studios. They want to use that IP outside of games.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're definitely right. Well, it'll be interesting to see. So normally this would be I would do plugs and then we go into the back half, but the show's over now. We got to go. So, I'm gonna do the housekeeping and then we're gonna end the show, everybody. Sorry. I should have paused this at some point, I guess, but we were in it on this one. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation. So let me remind you that this episode of FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of July. For the very last time, they are Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snack Go, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to be a supporter like they did and go and get your name read on the air, get the show early, get a bunch of other good perks and goodies, guess what? You can do that by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to our Patreon, our Discord, our email address. If you want to show your support, you want to keep the conversation rolling between episodes, you want to write into the show, however you choose to get involved with us here at FlipScreen Games, that's the way to do it. Flipscreen.games. That's our website. Go over there and click on some stuff. It helps us out a lot. And guess what? It doesn't cost you anything to click on things. So just go click on some stuff. Helps us out quite a bit. So do what you can. All right, Steve. Great episode. You nailed it.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah.
I had a good time.
Good. Reunited and it feels so good. So everybody, we have a bunch of questions in the question block for next week. So I got to tell you, we're like this close to a primo mailbag episode. So write in with some more questions for next week. And if there's no big news, maybe we'll just do a nice meaty mailbag episode. How's that sound, Steve?
Yeah, sounds good. I always like answering questions.
Me too.
Ask
All right.
ask silly things, anything. And
Yeah.
and I know we need to do another trivia episode at some point. Everyone keeps hounding Zaid in the Discord for another
Guys,
Jeopardy.
last week was the first one. We
I
need a
know.
couple weeks to get another one together. The folks did love it though, so if you haven't checked it out, go check out
Yeah.
episode 100. We did our Jeopardy episode, and if you missed episode 100 of Nintendo Noise, make sure you go check that out. We did our top 100 Nintendo games of all time, and people are divided. Go
Yeah.
check it out.
Number one game, Picto Chat for Nintendo DS. Really great
What
game.
an
Really
upset!
great.
What an
Everyone
upset!
loves it.
Yeah, number 2 Nintendogs. Who would have believed it? Anyway. Go check it out. Thank you guys again for your support. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you for understanding about last week's missed episode. I promise it won't happen again. Thank you all so much for tuning in. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week, babies. Mwah.